the focus of the STEAM Plus project is really how can we innovate higher education so that we can prepare all the students for the complex issues of the 21st century. And for innovating higher education, we all know that curriculum reform is an extremely slow and full of resistance process. That's why we think, or we investigate if talent programs can be laboratories, like innovation labs, that can then spread like an oil stain to inspire all higher university students. So the context, the SWOT analysis that we made is we're now in a context that it's called the Anthropocene, mainly like man-made challenges, the climate change and the biodiversity loss. They're all consequences of our economic, industrial, technological model. So sustainability, to educate young people, give them a future, will really mean to question that model and not reproducing it, with the same educational models of the past. So the threats we have are these, extremely important and complex societal challenges that really urge us to act really fast. We have few years left before we reach critical tipping points, and the weakness is effectively that it's the higher education institutions are built in medieval times. They're very well institutionalized, and they are very slow in adapting. What we do have as a strength, we have extremely motivated, talented, and well-connected young people. They come to the street and they say, we don't trust the schools anymore. So they are motivated, they're engaged. We have a lot of people out there in society that also say, let's try something new, that do a change, that are resilient, and we have huge connectivity, we have the internet, etc. So, and the opportunities that we have now also is, we have the Sustainable Development Goals, we have the European Green Deal that really says we need to change our economies so that we leave no one behind, stay within the donut, and do not transgress the planetary boundaries. And, as a consequence of the Green Deal, business people are now saying we were not prepared for that by the business schools. How can we learn that? So there is a real big urge for learning that we would, with STEAM saying, okay, we're not going to reform the curriculum. We're not going to send those business people back to the university. Let's create some innovation lab where we can learn about these complex issues. But this is where STEAM Plus is situating itself. We're using the strengths to, to complement the weakness of the institution. We're not changing the curriculum, but we're adding something on, using the power of the learners. We're totally learner driven, give the initiative to the students rather than, ask first the teachers to change their mindset, which is going to happen. And then use that international context, that pull from the international agreements and to really push for, paying attention to these complex issues also in higher education. So we're focusing on transdisciplinary learning because the complexity requires everybody to work together. I hope that most people here also went to the previous session where you learned it. We have to adapt our higher education, which is now all in silos, looking at separate parts of the puzzle. We have to add something onto that where learners are learning to look at the complexity of the puzzle and leave them, empower them to explore different tracks. So what we do in the STEAM project, we have all the disciplines are mixed in groups or brought together. It's not an add-on to, it's not like we're doing sciences and then we add on a course on sustainability, but we bring them all the disciplines together: science, technology, engineering, mathematics, economics, ethics, humanities, but also learning with societal actors, the stakeholders in society that are pioneering new approaches. They are really the classrooms where we can learn about these societal issues. And so from these interactions, from transcending the disciplines and learning together in co-creative processes with societal actors, we have emerging new ideas, things that we did not know that we didn't know them, but all of a sudden something new emerges. So in the STEAM project, we're experimenting with these different innovation labs. The one in Leuven was presented in the previous session. We also have honors programs in Oslo that were presented the day before yesterday. But here we will talk about specifically the ones in Venice and the one in Klaipėda that is being planned. And so from all these innovation labs that can be very, very different depending on the context, we will then develop a manual, or not a manual, it's not like it's a cookbook, you know, we do not prescribe what the methodology is, but more like an inspiration book for, you know, to inspire learners to think we need more, we need to understand how we can learn to face these, you know, the complexity of the current system. How can we empower them to start up this kind of learning processes, learner-driven, you know, scaling by empowering the learners. But also the teachers who say, or the educators who say, like, I would like to integrate much more of the, you know, the complexity in my course, but I can't because I'm in this discipline and I'm supposed to stay within my discipline. We also want to help them, like, how can you start coaching these innovation labs, looking at complexity? And then once we have that innovation lab inspiration path, you know, and we can have many people trying to explore and experiment this, then of course the next question is, how can we make sure that all the students get access to that they're empowered, or that they're encouraged, or maybe even, you know, valorized for taking this course, because disciplinary knowledge will not be enough to be a citizen in the 21st century. So that is where we need policy support at either the institutional level, you know, some universities give ACTS points to this, but it could also be at higher political level, you know, that the funding or other regulation. So these are the three packages in the STEAM project. We're exploring also sorts of very, you know, a million different possibilities of innovation labs. Then we try to distill from that, you know, what are the basic principles that then can be inspire others, you know, even outside of Europe, to try something similar, and then make sure that the policy context changes. So that, you know, it becomes mainstream. You know, we're not changing the curriculum, we're adding something on, and that should be accessible to all students. So this is a bit the big plan of the STEAM Plus project. And of course, as we're, you know, it's about transdisciplinary learning. It's not like we are the 5 experts that will find the solution and then communicate it to society. We also want to have, as much as possible, exchanges and co-creation with, you know, with higher education institutions, but we're also talking with business people who say, like, we need a circular economy, we don't know how to do that, or cities that say we're facing complex problems, we don't know how to solve that. So the learning is like, you know, leaving the ivory tower, and the learning is in society, it is transdisciplinary. So that's why we also want to have those voices. If we're going to write the ILIP, we want to make sure that it addresses the questions and the needs and the uncertainties of everybody who feels the need to learn. So that's why we're also very grateful for this opportunity to present our labs here, and then we'll make sure that we have a lot of time to discuss with the participants, or, you know, the people who join this session. But now first we're going to give you 2 examples of innovation labs, and the first one is from Foscari, I hope I say that correctly, in Italy, and they have been, you know, they have been doing this. They are, I always say they have routine in this. They've done it really many times, and they're very proficient in it. And the second one is Klaipėda, where until half a year ago they said we have no idea how to start this up. So these are 2 cases of, you know, one that is already well embedded and they have the routines, and another one that's like, how do I do that? And then see how you can, you know, launch something and get started. So I now pass the floor to Luca.
Yep. Thank you very much. So do I ask you to proceed with the slides then? Okay, so thank you very much. So I don't share anything, which is a good news given the fact that I'm completely new of this platform here. Anyway, thank you very much, people. I'm Luca Corazzini. I'm the coordinator of the STEAM Plus Unive project, in the sense that we are actually the first partner implementing a lab in presence. So the story of this lab is very long, since it was supposed to be run last year, but unfortunately, you know, we were forced, because of the COVID-19 emergency, to postpone it by 1 year. So anyway, So the scientific coordinator of this project is Daniele Brombal, who actually is doing a big job to design everything. And the title of the lab will be Citizen Science for Marine Conservation. Next slide, please. Can I? Thank you. Oh yeah, no, proceed with the entire slide. Let's put everything. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so first of all, let me give you a very short idea of what we want to do in this lab year. So the main goal of the lab is actually to develop socio-ecological literacy, contributing to the co-creation of knowledge for marine conservation. In a second, I will also tell you why marine conservation, but immediately from the venue of the conference, you might understand why we are focusing on marine conservation and nurturing the commitment for environmental stewardship in light of citizen science. Okay, so why marine conservation? We will have this lab in Venice, and actually this is very important because given the let's say the challenge that this unique in the world city is actually facing nowadays. The most of you might have heard a few years ago about the famous Mose problem, the Mose digs problem. And also given the fact that we are in the middle of a wildlife sanctuary, as I'm going to show you when discussing the structure of the lab. So as I told you, one of the main theoretical framework we will use is citizen science, where you can definitely imagine that diversity is a plus. Okay, so by definition, the approach we want to follow is multidisciplinary, and I should say even methodological diverse, and where we consider, cultural heterogeneity as a kind of plus of our lab, given the fact that all the participants will have, some kind of specific skills, specific cultural dimension that will enrich the overall success of the lab. And next slide. Okay, yeah. So we have an underlying framework. We build the overall structure of the lab on, which is the theory U. And the way in which we interpret the theory U for our lab is the fact that it's a dynamic learning process where, the collaboration among the participants to grasp knowledge, it's actually bridging the three most important spheres, the cognitive, emotional, and institutional spheres, from the individual perspective. A key word of our lab will be co-creation, as I'm going to show you in the structure of the lab. We have many sessions of co-creation, of course, that will be co-creation of knowledge that will be focusing on sea life conservation. And the idea here is actually to let people even emotionally perceive the context where we are running our lab, and letting them reflect in deep about potential long-term solutions in light of, marine conservation in Venice. I don't want to repeat it again, but we will follow a multidisciplinary approach, and some activities also, highlighting some kind of artistic dimension, asking, challenging participants to choose a kind of art form to communicate their view and their reflections about marine conservation. Okay, so this was a very, a quick introduction of the aim of the lab, but now I'm going to show you exactly the structure of the lab, which is the next slide. So this will be, the main graph representing the activities we want to implement during our lab. So the core of the lab is contained in between day 1 and day 4, where the most of the activities will occur. Day 0 is actually the ice-breaking activities where, we will join together with all the participants and we'll start sharing motivations for participating in the lab and, making some kind of ice-breaking activities, knowing each other. Day 1 and day 2, they can be identified as the input days, with day 2 being very special, as I'm going to tell you, because, so day 1 will be more focusing on, sessions interactive sessions that are aimed at, first of all, introducing the rationale of the lab. Second, to have a kind of insight about what we mean, in particular for our lab, in light of our lab, about citizen science. And finally, to introduce people about the socio-ecological interactions in the Venetian lagoon in light of the challenge that Venice is actually facing the last 2 decades. Day 2 is still in the input, I would say, dimension of the lab, but with a very strong emotional experience, in the sense that we will bring all people in Caroman, which is a wildlife sanctuary in Venice, where a lot of extremely nice ecological activities can be run, including bird watching, given the fact that by its specificity, the specific conformation, Venice is extremely rich of non-human beings, and also it shows individuals how the wildlife sanctuary can be opposed to the Mose digs, which instead looks at the intervention of human being in the context of Venice. Here, the main challenge is actually to let people to experience the lagoon, also taking the perspective of non-human beings. Okay, so we move to day 3 and day 4. So once received all the input sessions, now we are more on the co-creation dimension of our lab. So all the co-creation sections, which are actually 5, will be focusing on day 3 and day 4. For day 3, we are more on the envisioning dimension of our lab, and there will be 2 co-creation activities there. The first one, indeed, focusing on envisioning an ideal socio-ecological future for the lagoon, again, privileging not only the human being vision, but also taking into account the non-human being dimension. And second, given this kind of inputs in the previous 2 days, starting setting goals towards an ideal social ecological future. So here we are also thinking about activities like letters from the future, in which actually we let people to imagine a future where all the main stakeholders, humans and non-humans, can find their position in. Then, after this kind of more emotional envisioning activities, we move to day 4, where instead the focus here is citizen science, where actually after having defined goals and future visions, we will start thinking about how to bridge these goals with required needs, required skills that might help people to define concrete activities, concrete interventions for marine conservation. And therefore, in the next 2 sessions, co-creation section, which are the 4 and 5, we will actually let people design citizen science activities that might implement concrete interventions for marine conservation, and also identifying which kind of resources we need, both physical resources and knowledge resources, and how let policymakers intervene to realize this kind of projects. Okay, so I mean, sorry for being very, very fast, but this was mainly the structure of the first lab. Let's hope that everything will work. I saw one of the initial questions here in the chat. So actually at the moment, the project is to have 1 student, 1 teacher from each of the talent program partners of the STEAM Plus. So at the moment there will be 9 professors and 9 teachers working together in these 5 days. And the profile is very diverse, so this will reflect definitely, the diversity among the partners of this STEAM Plus project.
Luca, it's
Thank you.
9 students and 9 teachers.
Yes, 9 students. What did I say? Didn't say this? 9 students and 90. Oh, sorry, 9 teachers. Yes. Okay. Yes, you're right. Sorry. My fault. So that's really, you know, academic bias. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much for this.
You're right.
Yeah, I will give the floor to James from Klaipėda in Lithuania. You have to unmute yourself, James.
I should be unmuted now, yeah. As Anne said at the beginning, we didn't know where we were going to start a few weeks ago, months ago. What we wanted to do was to make sure that whatever we started and whatever we did would last longer than the week that we ran it. And so the main theme is about mobilizing all talents for sustainable development, okay? And if we look on the screen now, I'll talk through that in a minute, but we have a lot of ideas, examples of strategies and plans that already exist. In Klaipėda, our main challenge, it's a big one. We have the coastal area, we have the seaport, we have the Baltic Sea itself, which is with issues in terms of pollution and cleanliness. We have a UNESCO World Heritage Site on the Curonian Spit, lagoon on one side and the Baltic Sea on the other. And sometimes the bigger the issue, Baltic Sea, the bigger the issue, the harder it is to see it. We have a saying about, you know, you can't see the wood for the trees. This kind of issue about tackling problems, if it's too big, it's not my problem because it's somebody else's. I'm not big enough to step up to take on that challenge. So thinking about our challenge in Klaipėda, we should be thinking about coastal seaport, Baltic Sea, pollution, so on and so forth. But we want our laboratory innovation lab to not to provide a quick access to the problem. We want students to kind of engage and then start to see and start to feel a need to expand their knowledge further outside of what they've been taught. Okay, because if we go straight there, then there's no kind of further step they can take. So we wanted to start off with a beginning, so a point of reference that they can connect to. And so it relates to day-to-day challenges for students primarily. What do they know already? What do they want to know more about? What are they likely to know already? What are they likely to know more about in the future? The audience engagement is quite important because if we fail to connect to the very beginning with the audience, in this case primarily the students, and then whoever we bring in as part of the transdisciplinary teaching approach, learning approach, knowledge sharing approach, if we fail to get that mixed right at the beginning, then we fail really in the whole week process. So in terms of getting the audience together, we wanted to give them a challenge, a task that connects them to the issue through their day-to-day activity. And so, no, keep on one, yeah. So what we see on the screen now is a set of structures, knowledge systems in place already, quite a lot. A local, national on one side, international, European on the other. I've purposely missed off the UN SDGs from there. I mean, there's a lot going on. I remember going to a conference a few years ago and we had lots of discussion about sustainability, about human rights, about discrimination, about freedom of press and so on. And one of the speakers said, if we all stuck to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, then we wouldn't need any other kind of legislation for anything else at all. And kind of there lays the problem because we have many, many declarations and support structures, and maybe too many. Are these all connected? They probably are. Do we know how they're connected? No, we don't. Do the people working on one of them connect or talk to the other people on another? I don't know. So there's a big question about what we have that already exists. You can see a collection on the screen here, and they will differ from country to country. And then we have a vague understanding of how they work, how they connect, and how we engage. How can I get involved in a Klaipėda sustainable urban mobility plan? Well, there is a precursor about that plan that says that they have to engage, the city has to engage with citizens. How do I get involved? And I don't know. So these are what we've set out as the supporting, so-called supporting structures for sustainability in Klaipėda. The next slide. Yeah, so as I said, there are lots of promises, agreements. We don't always know about the ownership of these arrangements, agreements, and so on. It's confusing, it's convoluted. We don't know which ones are alive, which ones are not live and kicking. We know some of them. We get involved in Mobility Week, maybe Green Energy Week. We do things on campus and off campus. Here are some of the companies or organizations that are working in some of these sustainable development fields. Okay, so what do I mean? Well, the City B is a car sharing scheme, okay, and it's developed by a Lithuanian company here. We work across the Baltics and into Poland, I think. We have a very innovative way of getting in and out of the car. We use our phone to unlock the car and to lock it. It's a brilliant scheme. Look at it. It works, and it works very well. The T logo next to it, that's a solar panel company developed by a technical university student in Lithuania. But he sets the company up in Germany because he didn't get the support to do the company development in Lithuania. So that kind of gives you some idea about how willing we are as a country, perhaps, to support initiatives around sustainable development. Okay, Vinted, you probably all know this. I don't. My daughter does. It's a website for app for sharing or selling clothes, I think, online. Humana is a high street version of the same, second-hand clothing, again, big amongst the students, and no longer is it embarrassed to talk about wearing second-hand clothes. It used to be a very embarrassing thing. For me as a kid, if I had second-hand clothes, even my brothers, it would be very embarrassing to admit it, but no more. Sustainable Gastro, that's a young, fairly new organization in Lithuania trying to set up an awareness amongst hotels, eating houses, restaurants, cafes, and so on, about how they can be more sustainable in food and service industries, hotels, cafes, restaurants, and so on. Meister Bank is a food bank. It takes food from supermarkets and gives it to people that can't afford to eat. So food poverty, it's one of the 17 SDGs. It's quite alive and kicking here in Lithuania, as it is in probably your countries as well. Grąžinta Vertė, that's interesting. We have one of the most successful bottle, plastic, and can recycling schemes in Europe. Fact, I think we're the top one, if not the top 5, then certainly the top 10. And the website's great. It tells you how many bottles or packaging items have been returned. As you can see there, since 2016, nearly 3 billion? Nearly 3 billion, I think. It's gone up 10,000 since last Monday, okay? So it's a constant counter on screen. Great, but can you go on the side and can you find out what they're doing with the recycled glass or recycled cans or recycled plastic? No, you can't. Did it tell you anything about the circular economy? No, they don't. Did it tell you what impact we've made on the environment? No, they don't. Well, 3 billion saved packaging units. There's quite a lot of impact we've made in not putting it into a landfill. What impact? I don't know, because again, it's a missed opportunity to promote what we're doing. It's a great idea, but fully developed, maybe not. Next slide. Right, so knowing what exists and knowing how disconnected it is, knowing what schemes already, again, exist, and how they're trying to solve some of the issues, we picked out 5 particular themes for the Innovation Lab. And the 5 themes we chose because we want them to have a resonance with the students. So transport, for sure. Transport is what they need and will use every single day of the week. Energy, yeah, I mean, it's everywhere we are. The university in Klaipėda, we have solar panel heating, I think, and energy on some of the student dormitories. Okay, so they are aware of what's happening on site a little bit so far. Food, we've talked about, okay? we throw probably enough away because we don't use it every week. So it's an impact for students, how much they can afford to pay and spend and buy, and how to make the most of that expenditure. Clothing, well, again, it's very expensive, and peer pressure is quite big now with Instagrams and social media. There's a very, very big push to kind of remain ahead of the game, whatever that means, and to look your part and to be following people who are wearing a certain thing or not. Okay, so health is what I would consider to be encapsulating all of the other four. And so the diagram on the screen shows you where these 5 fit in to the SDGs, okay? And it could be other ones, but I've chosen those ones, 2, 3, 7, 11, and 12. 11 and 12 are a lot bigger, but I put these 2 in here for this reason, okay? Yeah, I think by having this kind of approach, we're giving the students an understanding. We're not patronizingly telling them things they don't know. We're saying, think about how you live. Think about how you would like to live, and think about how you might be living in 5, 10, 15 years' time. How will it change? Well, it'll change in a big way, won't it? If I, for example, if I show my daughter my record collection, my CD collection, my cassette tape collection, my hi-fi unit, and everything else in my living room, she laughs and she says, why do you need all that stuff? Because I can do all of that on my phone. And she's right. We can do a lot more with a lot less. So it's kind of a sign that we can do more with less now. But how well are we doing that? So next slide. Yeah, the Innovation Lab. When I talked about a legacy, I want the Innovation Lab to provide a connection between the themes, which we've talked about. It'll be done through site-based workshops. So we will invite those people in, and we will also go to where they are and see logistics issues, okay? How and where they get collections of clothes, of food, transport, maintenance hubs, and whatever it might be. Innovation labs for electric buses, scooters, bikes, and so on. Students will find ways of asking questions and asking how it can be better, and is it doing enough? The Innovation Lab should lead the students to develop what we would expect to be some sort of green campus strategy, for want of a better word, plan of action, one of a better word. Okay, something that lasts outside of the lab and is transferable in terms of its process to anywhere else. Are we doing it already? Yes, lots of universities already do it, but lots of them don't do it. And how well they do it? Quite often it depends on who's managing. A great active president of the Students' Union, then you have a great green campus plan. Okay, a lack of political motivation among students, then a poorer, weaker president, and no interest in this kind of altruistic approach to university life. So, to surmise, I think audience, very important. How do we connect with them, and how do we get them interested in themes that seem a little bit outside of their jurisdiction, interest area, or comfort zone? Interest, again, it makes sense to get them interested in things that they're interested in doing. The live legacy, of course, there has to be something that lasts longer than them. And it's a great way also for students to come back to the university, alumni or not, and say, that's what I did with 15 other colleagues of mine. And the live legacy is only a live legacy if it's critically renewed, often, very often, ideally. And I pound this into my students' heads about being critically good and analysing anything, everything, even me. I introduce myself as saying, I'm not an expert, and I can be wrong, and you need to tell me if I am wrong and where you would improve what I've done wrong. So, in a nutshell, that's a little bit of a pictorial essence of the lab, and this only connects. I think that's quite important because we have so much available, and we very often fail to make the connection between what exists. Thank you.
Anne, je bent nog gemute.
Thank you very much for these wonderful proposals. I hope that the people in the audience are not intimidated by the very elaborate and very sophisticated labs that were presented here. The Venice one is a residential full week on a beautiful island, international. While people might say, well, we can't organize that logistically. That's too difficult. What James is proposing is we don't need to go to an island. The campus can be, the place-based, classroom where we learn about greening the campus. So just to say that the labs are just, possible solutions or possible pathways or possible trajectories to do something that is available in your context. If you don't have a lagoon, you have a campus, or you may have a local city or a local area. That is your classroom. And then indeed, what James is saying, look at the resilience that is already there, look at what is already emerging in terms of solutions or contribution to solutions. In Venice, they count on citizens they call it citizen science, but it's really citizens and engaging the citizens in the safeguarding the lagoon or engaging the students in keeping the campus green, etc. So those are the basic principles. You choose your classroom in a place-based way, and that's not necessarily physically around you. We had an example a while ago from what the students in Oslo did, and there was a group of students in computer programming, working on artificial intelligence, and then another group of students in ethics. And the computer programmers are like, ethics is a stupid course, we postpone it until the last year and we don't see how it is possibly relevant for our work, we're just computing, that's it. And then the ethics student said, wait a minute, you are impacting the world that I'm going to be part of. So I want to discuss with you what you're doing. And so together they started up this dialogue of, the impact that artificial intelligence can have in terms of privacy or human rights. And then they also brought in some of the ideas or the theories that are already there, but not in a technical way. They said, our professors are always coming with their own disciplinary terminology. So we just discussed without the jargon. And what they saw was that after a couple of months, the engineering students started saying among each other, like, oh, but if we take that solution, we're going to be in, some utilitaristic ethical process. There you see that this mutual learning among students on a practical problem can be so much powerful than just teaching them ethics and teaching them, all the things separately. So that, I think, are like the general principles that we're trying to get out of these many examples. And if you think that a couple of months ago in Klaipeda they didn't know how to start, you can see how, it's the low-hanging fruit, what is already there, and how can we make that into a classroom. So maybe I would now like to give the audience the opportunity to ask questions about what has been presented, and then maybe the last minutes also, like, you would like to start up something similar, what would you be looking for in this Innovation Lab inspiration book? You give us input in, were these examples enough, or should we also explain a bit more? So please, I don't know, I haven't seen the chat because I was sharing my screen. I'll just look at the questions. Somebody asked at Luca how many students are involved and what their profile is. So, oh yeah, that was already answered.
Yeah, so I think there are no new questions at the moment, but I think they will come in now. But maybe in the meantime, I have another question for Luca, because right now, if I understood correctly, the members are STEAM Plus members, so it's an international group. What are your ideas for the future? Will this remain an international innovation lab, or do you want to do something a bit more local, or what are your ideas?
Sorry, I am not sure that I get the question. So, I mean, that's the first lab, and we don't, I mean, at the moment, we have not, a follow-up. So at the moment, it's actually the lab as an experience, as our, experiment, let's say, with this very strong topic to be covered together. And the people participating in that will be somewhat prepared to the lab through material that we will prepare and share before the lab. So but probably was not the question.
Yeah. No, you understood correctly. I misunderstood you in the beginning. I thought that you wanted to continue this lab after this experience, but for now it's a one-time experiment. Yeah.
Exactly. So I can't exclude that we will continue, honestly, but for sure at the moment we do not have a clear follow-up in mind.
Yeah, it sounds so interesting. That's why I was already thinking ahead from what will they do next. But great, thank you.
And I can add something to that. You know, Luca is physically bringing the students from all over Europe together on, you know, in the lagoon there. But in fact, in you know, it's like you have the summer school. A lab can be a summer school for a week, or it can be, you know, something like in Leuven. It is spread out over the academic year. You know, that it depends on the means that you have and the context that you have. We could not put our students for a full week during the academic year somewhere separate. So that's why we built it in through the academic year. But the underlying learning processes are the same. You know, the intensity of the exchange, the heterogeneity of the students. And then what is nice now, you know, in Venice, we're going to fly in from everywhere to Venice. But in Leuven, we had an international team as well, because you have already students from all over the world in many universities. So you don't need to, you know, you don't need to take an airplane to have an international team by now. And what we will also for sure do in Venice, you know, we're going to have the students, or at least a student and a teacher from all the partner countries there. So we will probably create this group that goes through this intensive experience, but then when they go back home for the rest of the year, continue co-creating and helping us to design this Innovation Lab inspiration book. What did they learn from? What did they want to share in this? So it will not be like James was saying. It should not just be, you know, have a nice lab and then finish, go back home. It has to be a seed. But what will grow out of the seed is also in the hands of the students and in the hands of the lab. You know, we will co-create there and come up with ideas.
And can I add also another aspect, which somewhat is also related to the next question I received from Ron. In reality, I mean, we have a natural follow-up. It's more self-interest, let me say, because I'm also part of the College Internazionale, which is an honor program. And actually, it's by definition, including students from all the faculties we have in University of Venice. So we have people in chemistry, we have people in humanities, and so on and so forth. In this College Internazionale, we have a specific program in sustainability. And so this actually, I mean, of course, I see a lot of spillovers, not only in terms of the ex post lab, but also the ex ante lab in terms of the way in which we designed the lab. Indeed, Daniele Brombal was also one of the faculty members of the sustainability program of our honor program, of our College Internazionale. And this, you know, Daniele has a very strong experience in dealing with the different skills and different abilities of students working on the same topic, okay? So for instance, in the sustainability program we have in College Internazionale, again, the audience is very diverse in terms of educational background, in the sense that we have people in informatics, people in chemistry, people in economics, and they actually work together for 2 years with a lot of team projects on the topic of sustainability, okay, in general topic of sustainability. And this is actually what helped a lot Daniele and the overall Venice team in designing the lab, because we have a bit of experience with this interaction, okay? Without, I mean, of course, recognizing that is a very tough, it's a very tough aspect of a lab. So whenever you bring, a lot of skills talking together, this makes a lot of, introduces a lot of complications, but also increases the potential payoff out of this activity.
Thank you, Luca. Is that Ron? You can also unmute yourself and react to what Luca is saying. This is
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very interesting to see that you use the theory U in 5 days, which is a challenge and a kind of a hurdle for students, I guess. But I can imagine it helps them to be forced to into that conversation about what do I bring in this problem and what do you bring in this problem, because students, well, in my experience, as I wrote, find it very difficult to listen to others, to listen to other domains, because we educate them in a certain domain. But at the same time, it's very important to prepare them for that, because, well, in real life, of course, they need to adjust everything and be firm and at the same time soft on their own knowledge. What helps this problem and what other knowledge helps this problem from others. And that process, well, we have a student who has made a workshop on it with a step-by-step work-wise, and we hope we are going to experiment with it the next year after the summer. So we hope we can give students an instrument to work with this adjusting of knowledge from different domains.
Ron, can we use that tool for our implementation pathway? But we should not be reinventing the wheel. If you have material.
No. Well, it's from a student who has had a scholarship for it from our university. If you send me your email address, then I can contact her with you.
Okay.
And maybe she's willing to help you out, or maybe to join one of the sessions.
Yeah, I think what I mean, like, if there's so much, like James was saying, so many brilliant initiatives are already out there.
Yeah.
So STEAM, we're not just going to do 3 labs and then, think that we have invented something new. These are just ways that we really, we bring them into practice, different contexts, different models, one residential, James, one will be, on campus. So these are all different. The more diversity we explore, the more we will start understanding what the core principles are for encouraging the students to start, what you say, unlearning. We have trained them to think in disciplinary ways, to say, you will be the expert, you take this course, you will become an expert, and then you let society implement your solution. And what they have to unlearn that, be soft on their disciplinary look, and be modest, and learn to co-create something that is radically new, that is uncertain, but that could be, not a continuation of the past, but a vision of the future. So it's integrating all these things, and we understand now more and more that is not an individual learning process. You can't have an individual student integrating all these, ethics and it is in the team, it is in the community, in the co-creation of knowledge is where it happens. But if you look at the auditoria in the universities, you have one expert in front, and then like a, auditoria, like a cinema room or of a passive audience. So even the architecture of we have to leave the buildings of the university and go into the, the more complex campus, the open campus, the open city, the places there. So those are the principles that we're trying to test in the labs, but also looking at what's happening elsewhere and then filtering them out and trying to bring them together so that people elsewhere, we say, like, we're interested in that and we would like to start prepare our students for these complex issues. How can we start up such an innovation lab? How can we do it and make it really, low-hanging fruit, easy stepping stones?
Well, we did make a publication about how we organized and why we organized it as we do about innovation labs. So I've put my email address in the chat. If you mail me, I will return both the contact with the student and the publication. Maybe it's useful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let me see if there's other questions or remarks. Okay, so maybe I would like everybody to sort of like put in the chat. I'll give you, we have 8 more minutes, so I'll give you 2 minutes to everybody put in the chat 1 word or maybe 1 sentence of what has inspired you from what you heard from Luca and James. Like, wow, I picked up that idea. This is something that I can do something with. So can I give you just one minute to reflect, or just quickly, and just put your. We don't have a Mentimeter here because we don't have the questions pre-formulated, but we want you to sort of like mind map, like this is what inspired me, or this is what I pick up.
And Anne and James and Luca, maybe in the meantime you can discuss the question about publicity of the project in the chat.
Oh, I see. Oh, thank you very much. Yes, sorry, I missed that question. So, I mean, at the moment, with the overall STEAM Plus project, we have a website that actually is going to collect, the most of the communication part of all the parts of the project. We had the policymaker, we had a meeting with our policy partners in Italy, which actually was one of the main questions that I think is really related to this initial question, is how you can make it true in the real life. Okay, so for instance, we are as an academic professor, I know that actually we have very narrow space where we can explore new, teaching activities or multidisciplinary activities, transdisciplinary activities. And this is definitely one of the most important questions we would like to try to answer in light also of the results of this of the STEAM Plus project. But, of course, the ambition here is actually to go to the policy partners, to the policy makers and saying, okay, look, this is our experience. There are some aspects of this experience that can be formalized in an objective way, that the outcome can be measured in an objective way, and therefore there is space to try to enrich our programs, our university programs, for instance, since university is the only reality I know. So that's what I could say about this question here on my side.
James, you want to add something to that?
It's a good question, because every time we announce an activity out of a European project, there's a little bit of a shut-up mentality in people's heads that we're talking to about it's a European project, it's a 3-year lifespan, and then we don't know what will happen after. So the communication's important, but the communication's important not about the project activity as much as what will last after the project finishes, because if we're in year 2 or year 3 of the project, then we do a project activity now, an innovation lab, okay, and then what? Okay, so publicity, communication with the public, yes, but it has to be linked to some sort of long-term policy plan, implementation plan, or take-up plan by the city or the university or the companies involved or somebody else amongst our transdisciplinary stakeholder group. And it can't just be pronounced as a result from a project.
Thank you, James. I'd like to add to that as I showed you in one of my first slides, we have the innovation labs, we have the innovation lab inspiration pathway, the sort of like the inspiration book, and then thirdly we will have the policy menu for policy inspiration is called. So and policy indeed at the level of the institutions, the university itself, but also at political level. And we all know that, say, like, okay, this is every 3-year European project will write a policy brief or policy recommendations, but we all know that it's not like policies are sitting there waiting at their desk for some scientist to bring them their conclusions and say, like, oh, now I know what I'm going to do. So what we're trying to do, and we're going to also do a policy meetup at European level. That will be in September next year, 22. So what we do now is we start the dialogue with them. We say, Europe, hey, you have launched this European Green Deal, and you realize that learning is needed for that, because all the companies are not educated for that. We're all educated in the old extractive, competitive model, and now we have to move towards a more sustainable model. So what are you going to do to encourage the universities or the regional governments, to unlock the doorway to add this connecting piece to higher education? And so we'll start. For me, the trick is always to look at their agendas. Like the Flemish government is really high on circular economy. So, it was one of the themes that James has talked about a lot. So like, this is your agenda. Well, maybe what we're doing here might be part, help you towards your agenda. So how can our work be relevant to you? And then what can you do to make sure that you pick it up and that you keep it going? So that is also a co-creation, not just among the learners, but a co-creation among different actors about, we all know that society needs to learn. We need the shift to a more sustainable model. We offering here an easy way, a low-hanging fruit to bring people together and to start learning with each other. How can we make sure that you take it up and embed it in the mainstream or encourage it to be embedded? And that is also a work, we're going to start working for a full year with these policy partners to see, like, where is their overlap? What is the leverages that they see? Why is it not happening now? Where is the resistance? What can happen to that? So I also already invite you, we have a couple of minutes left. The Copernicus Alliance is the European Network for Sustainable Higher Education. You can all become members of that. They are organizing a big summit in September 22, 5 to 9 September 22, and we, the STEAM Plus project, will organize the European policy meetup in the context of that conference, because we think we will reach more, people in European decision-making positions if it's a big European conference rather than just one tiny Erasmus Plus project. So we're also there, we're, like James was saying, connecting what is already there and connecting and joining forces and speak with one voice. So I would really all invite you to look into that and to see how, don't let this conference just be a one-shot thing, but to keep exchanging and to keep co-creating together. Okay, I'm looking at the time.
Anne, could you maybe send us a link to a website or something in the chat about this Copernicus, was it right?
Copernicus Alliance, yes, I'll do that quickly.
Okay, thank you. In the meantime, is it okay with you if I end the meeting by saying a few words, or would you like to do that yourself?
No, you could go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, I would first like to thank our speakers, of course, for their interesting contribution on mobilizing talent for sustainable development. I truly hope that this project will inspire change in higher education so that our students are better prepared for today's challenges in society. I further would like to thank all attendees for attending and for contributing to the discussion. And as final words, I would like to tell you that, well, in about 15 minutes, the next sessions will start. In track 1, the impact of COVID-19 on honors teachers will be discussed. In track 2, this track, reflections on the values of international networks in honors will be shared. And in track 3, Jessica Schweers, she was recently named Hanse's Teacher of the Year. We'll talk about designing an interdisciplinary honors module during Corona. So interdisciplinary, I see some overlap with this topic. So maybe a lot of the attendees in this session would like to switch to track 3. Again, a big thank you to the speakers. I see also some thank yous coming in via chat. And I wish you all a great day and an inspirational rest of the conference.